Good day to you coders, and thank you for supporting us on Project Collaborate. In today's video, we are going to go over some examples of arrays. So to start off, we're going to talk about a little bit about initializing and declaring an array. So in order to initialize and declare array elements, there's a couple of ways you can do it. So the first way is specifying your type. You have to specify it always, putting your array brackets, and then let's call this array numbers. And then you create a new array object essentially, and then you put your type again, and then you want to put your square brackets, and then you want to specify the size of your array. And what this does is that it tells you how many elements can be put in this array. And then you close off your brackets and close it off with parentheses. And so that's one way to initialize an array. However, the one thing with this method is that you haven't specified the specific values of every index. So in the numbers array, you essentially have 20 elements, but all those elements are like empty. They don't have any value assigned to them. So what you can actually do is there's another way of declaring an array. So let's say you have another array, and let's call this one, let's just call this one hello. And so the way you can specify specific values to an array right when you're declaring that array is simply by putting these curly braces and then putting in numbers. So you can put in 1, 2, 3, 4, for example. And so if you notice here, these 4 numbers, those are all integers, and so they have to agree with the integer data type. And so essentially, if I system.out.println hello, and if I run this, so if you look in the console here, what you're going to see is you'll get like a memory address. And so what basically with arrays is you can't get the specific elements unless if you use the toString method, but that's not necessarily defined. And so when you try to print out an array, what's going to happen is you're going to get the memory address of where that array is stored. And so that brings us to our next topic of accessing array elements. So let's say we want to access the first element of the hello array. So we would type in our array name, hello, and then our first element, which is 1. And so the one thing you want to notice here is I'm going to put a 0 because in Java we start counting at 0, and so 1 is the 0th index, 2 is the first index, 3 is the second index, 4th is the third index. And so if I print this statement out, you'll see I'll get 1. And so since I print the 0th index out, I have printed out 1 essentially. And then so let's actually go back to our numbers array right here. So you'll notice that we haven't declared a value for any of the indices. And so what would happen if we try printing out one of the elements? So I'm just going to print out the 0th element again. So it prints out 0, and that's because in an array, all of the elements are defaulted to 0 if there's nothing assigned to it. But what if we want to assign something to it? So what we can do is here we can do, let's say, numbers, I don't know, 1. Let's say the second element, the first index, equals 3, for example, and then let's try printing out numbers. let's comment this out. And so if you print this out, you'll see it actually prints out 3. And so yeah, you can essentially assign all of the elements within numbers. So you're probably wondering what would happen if we tried to print out something that is not within the indices of one of the arrays. So let's try printing out the 20th index of the numbers array. So what will happen is you'll actually throw an error, and this is called an array out of bounds exception. And so basically what it's telling you is in this array there's only 19 indices, but you're trying to access the 20th index, and so you can't do that because that's not how it's defined for numbers. And so it'll actually throw an error for you. So the next thing we can do is we can iterate through arrays. And so let's go back up to our hello array. Let's add a couple more elements. So we have this hello array that goes from 1 to 10. And so in order to iterate through an array, you can use a for loop actually. So for int I equals 0, I is less than. So this statement here is especially important because it tells you how many times to iterate through the for loop. And so what you can do here is, so you have the hello array, right? So you can do hello.length. And so hello.length will essentially give you the amount of elements within the hello array. Out. Okay. And so there's a few things you should actually notice here. The first thing you should notice is I did less than rather than less than or an equal to, because the length gives you the amount of elements, but if you do equal to, then you'll have like the amount of elements. And so since we know that indices start at 0, so it's 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. until the amount of elements minus 1. And the amount of elements minus 1 is the maximum index. So if I actually run this, I will get, oh, still getting that exception, my bad. If I run this, so I will, if you look here, it prints out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And actually it might be better if we do a print statement. Yeah, there we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. However, if I put equals to here, oh, you'll notice it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but then it gives you an index out of bounds exception. And like I said before, the reason for this is because the hello array doesn't have a 10th index. It only has 9 indices. So the next thing I would like to do is go over multi-dimensional arrays. So let's say we have an array, int array. We can call this one flowers, because why not? Equals. And so multi-dimensional arrays are essentially arrays within arrays. So what you can do here is 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7. And so actually I did make a slight mistake here. So this should be, it should actually be 2 brackets because it's a 2-dimensional array. And so you'll notice here that this is we have essentially 4 arrays right here. We have the big one, and then we have this first one, second one, and third one. And so in order to access one of these elements, we can do system.out.println, and then we can do flowers. And then let's say we want to access the second element in the second array. So what you can do is you specify the array that you're accessing. So right now we have 3 arrays, right? So we want to access the second array. That'd be the 0th index, the first index. So you put 1 for your first bracket, and then the element you're accessing within that array. So 0th index, first index. And so since we're trying to access the 4, we can put 1 right there. And so this should output 4 for us. So if we run it, oh, forgot a semicolon, my bad. Yeah, so if you notice right there, it did output a 4 for us. I think it'll probably be more helpful if we put a print statement so that you can actually differentiate between. Yeah, so right here we have our 4 that we outputted from the flowers array. And then the next thing I want to go over is essentially iterating through a multi-dimensional array. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to access all of these elements, right? So we're actually going to be using a nested for loop. So we have for int I equals 0, I is less than. For this part, you want to look at how many arrays are within this mega, or like the bigger array. And so we know that there's 3 arrays, so you put 3 right there. And then I++. And then we're gonna have another for loop right here. For int j j less than. And then for this one, we also want to look at how many elements are within like every sub array, so to speak. And so that'd be 3. And then j++. And actually what we can just do here is boom. And then here when we want to system.out.print or print, we can do flowers. So we said before that the I right here is accessing each of the individual arrays. And so we put I as a first number. And then we said here that the j is accessing each of the individual elements within each array. And so our j would go right there. And then we can just system.out.print. So if we run this, it should technically iterate out every element within the array. Yeah, so let's make this easier to read. Yeah, so if you look here, we have 1, 2, 3 on our first row. And if you notice here, 1, 2, 3, our first array, 3, 4, 5, our second row, 3, 4, 5 is our second array. And then 5, 6, 7 is our third row, and 5, 6, 7 is our third array. And so that is essentially how you iterate through a multi-dimensional array. The last thing I would like to go over is the types of arrays. So right now, all my examples have been through integer arrays. However, you can have several types of arrays. So I can have, let's say, I don't know, a byte array. But, I don't know, equals, I don't know, 23, 44, 55. You can have a car array. And actually one thing to take note of a character array is that a character array is actually just a string. And so if you think about strings, they have multiple characters, and each character in a string is just a different index. And so like if I made this character array a string, the string would be AB. And then you can have a string array. And those are just some of the examples of types of arrays you can have. You can obviously use this for every primitive data type as well as objects. So one thing you will want to note is that you can't actually change the size of an array because it's static. The only way you can like quote unquote change the size is when you're declaring it. So right here, I can't change the size of the numbers from 20 to like 21. I would need to change this number specifically. And with that being said, that is all we have for arrays. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thank you.